And welcome back, everyone, to yet another edition of Going for Two, presented by our friends at Home Field Apparel. I am your host, the publisher of the Extra Points newsletter, Matt Brown. I am joined by my friend and colleague, Brian Fisher, once again, as we slog through what was allegedly the doldrums of college athletics. But now it looks like we're looking at potentially changing a bunch of significant rules. We're looking at potentially changing the basis of college football schedules. I understand that we are not the best barometers for what is a big deal and what is some deep, heavy nerd stuff, but it does feel like there's some like actual news and not just speculation that's about to happen here, right?
It's like you're either actually making some progress on some items like the D1 Council will do on Wednesday afternoon, or there's like just speculation over NIL deals or like crazy things happening in the world of college sports, but it never slows down. I mean, times have we come on here and been like, when can we get a break, Matt? When can we get a break? That's all I'm asking.
I've had a little bit of a break, but we'll see. Right? I want to. That's the D1 Council stuff is what I want to talk about here. You know, at the very beginning, you follow this stuff very closely. My understanding here, and for you can help educate our friends who are not tattooed to Twitter like maybe we are, that the council is about to vote on a couple of proposals that could be pretty significant in the college football world. One of them, if I understand this right, is basically ditching the 25-man signing limit for recruiting. If I'm understanding this correctly, assuming this vote goes through, which you expect it to, you can sign as many people as you want as long as you're at the hard cap of 85 scholarships coming into fall camp.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a kind of a slowish march towards hitting this number, and I think it's something that a lot of people have been discussing, like why aren't we just capping it at 85 and kind of going from there, especially once grad transfers came in. There was a lot of talk about the counters and initial counters, which face it was initially kind of put in place because SEC teams were signing 30 plus people, and people got up in arms about that, like how can you sign 30 kids and not guarantee them a spot. And then I think that conversation has certainly slowly faded away from the discourse. And frankly, this is kind of a response a little bit to kind of what happened during COVID. Guys got an extra year. Roster management was a little bit difficult. Throw in one-time transfer on top of that, and hey, roster management pretty darn difficult right now. I mean, that is pretty much every complaint. You speak to an assistant coach, you speak to a head coach. A lot of complaints related to how am I managing my roster? How am I getting back up to my numbers? And there was a kind of a patch, I guess you could say, kind of applied to where you can, because if you lost a number of guys, you could sign up to 7 more above the 25-man cap. They're like, all right, well, 32 is a nice number, but still schools were struggling. When you're losing 15, 20 guys to the portal, you can't really replace them that easily. And I think finding good options too is another thing, that a lot of coaches are struggling with right now. But at least when this vote, and pretty much everybody expects to pass, there might be some, discussion over it in terms of it not passing. But I think I've gotten every indication it will. And when that happens, coaches are basically been given free reign to how they manage their roster. And the ultimate in cap is going to be 85. And I think that's also kind of partly designed to kind of ward off a few legal challenges as well. I think that's kind of a part of the discussion, but it's going to be a brave new world. And there's going to be a lot of reporters out there that are going to certainly go line by line on some of those rosters when they get released after the spring or in the fall, in terms of, all right, we're at 84. This might be the number of people that we're going to get bringing in for a recruiting class.
When I was at SB Nation and briefly ran an Ohio State site for a while and helped other people run their sites, scholarship grids were one of the things that tended to perform the best in terms of like searchability, because people over the summer were always looking for this. I am kind of torn about this proposal in a couple of different ways. I very much understand the arguments for, in an era where people can transfer so much more easily, that not only is there a major competitive problem with not being able to get back up to 85 relatively quickly, there could be a legitimate safety issue. And I know that the poster children for over signing, or for some of the more aggressive applications of going above 25, were typically bigger programs in the SEC. And it's easy to see how some of those might benefit from this world. But correct me if I'm wrong, but when I thought of the leaders in college football who began to push for changing the 25-man limit, it wasn't Ole Miss and Alabama. It was the MAC, and it was Kansas, and it was some of these other places, because they realized, look, if you have a bad coaching transition, or if you miss on a couple JUCO guys, you could be sitting at 65 players, and you might not get to 85 in 3 or 4 years. That cripples your coaching staff. And that's a bad experience for your current athletes. It might even be a safety issue if you don't have enough linemen, which was an issue with some of the COVID stuff too. So I look at all that and think like, all right, it makes sense to change this. This would be my concern. And I don't really know if there's a way to actually address this. At the Power 5 level, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, at the P5 level right now, those scholarships are supposed to be guaranteed. Some schools do it year to year, but in this current year, they're supposed to be 4-year commitments. We both know that sometimes when a player hits the transfer portal, it is not always out of their free will and volition or their decision, that they may be very strongly encouraged by their coaching staff to go elsewhere. And they might, maybe some coaching staffs might be willing to be very aggressive in making that clear, right? My concern would be that theoretically you could have a coach decide to sign 40 kids every year, knowing full well that they're not going to keep all of them, and have the coach rather than the athletes be the main decider about whether you're still going to be on the roster moving forward. Just processing, I think, is the industry term, a large number of athletes. I don't really see how that's really great from the athlete's perspective, but I don't really know how you can like prove that or stop it. And I would imagine that's going to be part of what happens here as schools try to grab some semblance of control back from athletes. Am I off base?
No, I think that's a perfectly valid concern, and is part of the discussion that's going to happen on Wednesday when a lot of these D1 council leaders are going to talk about this which has been vetted by, the football oversight committee. And really the genesis of it was, the coaches themselves and the coaches association. So we understand where this proposal is getting that push from. It's obviously, coaches trying to manage their roster a little bit better. And, you're right. I mean, like you mentioned Kansas, that is a great example of a Power 5 program that was essentially an FCS team for the bulk of 4 or 5 years from now.
Yeah. Again, to be clear, friends, we are not saying they're basically an FCS team because they were as good as an FCS team, although that was true. Missouri Valley football team could have put them in the garbage can a couple of those years. We're saying they're an FCS team because they had 63 scholarships. They were like literally roster size. North Dakota.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So, I mean, like there are a lot of, that's those sort of issues where just natural attrition. I mean, that was the reason why, everybody thought the 25-man cap was going to be fine. Obviously you have 85, over a 4-year period that would have added up to 100 guys medically retire. They just want to move on from football. Maybe they're, just kind of riding the bench. Maybe they don't want to play somewhere else. They've got their degree. They're ready to move on. Would have that kind of natural attrition. Guys would go to the NFL even, like you would understand that your numbers would be all right. Yeah, you might be short, you might hit 80, 82 or something like that. And then you get three walk-ons of scholarship and you'll be fine. And away you go. But because of the transfer portal, because of the additional guys in the transfer portal that also had an additional year of eligibility, that kind of created this crunch. I mean, it's difficult. And you even look at the high school ranks, not as many high schoolers were kind of signed out of, coming out of their recruiting classes. So now you got kind of, adjustments that need to be made there. And you mentioned the MAC in particular. I mean, look, schools like that do want to sign and get back up to their numbers, because not only are their rosters being poached at the high end, but they have that natural attrition on the low end. That they've got to sign some additional guys out of high school. They've got to go into the JUCO ranks and whatnot. And I think this was in an ideal world a way that really it simplified things for a lot of people out there. You're not worrying about can I gray shirt this guy? Can I defer enrollment for another one? Can I play some of these games just so I can get my roster back up to where it needs to be? This is very simple, very clean. And I think that ultimately is probably a secondary driver on top of the legal issues that I think a lot of people see with, potential challenges out there in the minefield there. But, to be honest, I think this is something that just really is going to be an adjustment for college football. And there are pluses, there are minuses, but at the end of the day, I think this is just kind of the new reality that both coaches and the players themselves have to understand that maybe their spot is not really guaranteed, although they signed that 4-year deal with the school.
Yeah, right. It's not like that, and I don't know if anyone's going to try to sue over that kind of thing. I don't know from sitting at my desk right now what this will mean for high school for how everyone will approach roster management vis-a-vis high school recruiting versus established athletes. What you were talking about earlier, that's a documented fact. Like with these caps and with people being unable to dip more into the high school ranks, not as many high school kids were getting FBS offers. We even had a couple of programs. I think Texas State was like the famous one that was just like, we're just going to fill our entire recruiting class with transfers. We're going to sign like one high school kid because by God, we need to get good now, or I'm not going to have a job anymore. And so it was, it's better to go grab somebody that has an FBS body versus somebody that you're making a projection 2 or 3 years. And I don't know if that was the best for athletes generally. I think I might be a little bit surprised if there were that many P5 programs that said, we're going to try to take 40 high school kids most of the time. A couple of them might, maybe depending on who's on the hot seat, which is just going to lead to more attrition anyway. I would suspect it's going to be, you might have the schools that are desperately trying to build up numbers because they're so far behind might do that. But my gut is you'll see more of 22 to 27 high schoolers depending on the year, and maybe a little bit more activity in the portal. But
it's going to change, coach to coach, situation to situation. You might be close. Yeah. You think you're close to competing for a conference title. You might need, 1 or 2 additional skill position players. Like, I know when in talking with coaches, not only do you add all this in terms of just transferring to get your numbers back, but like the NIL conversations that are going on are a very real thing. And definitely dissuading a lot of coaches saying, when you're going into the portal and it's going to cost you, certainly your boosters, it's going to cost them, an NIL deal worth 25 to 50K for, some running back. Like when you can go to the high school ranks, obviously their quote unquote NIL value would be a little bit lower. It just would make sense to kind of, for a lot of programs in particular at the group of 5 level, to just go that route and be able to fill your numbers that way. And I think that's the other complicating factor with this is that, coaches understand that, there's the additional NIL element to managing your roster. And that has never been more of the case than kind of really this current cycle that we're in right now. And, it's led to some bad decisions. Certainly guys that would love to end up going back. Certainly guys that do not have a spot, and maybe this rule will allow a little bit flexibility. I know the NCAA's put out some numbers in terms of the transfer portal. Some of those numbers are inflated because a lot of them are walk-ons. Like,
yes.
I think that kind of gets overlooked a lot. Everybody talks about, there's 2,000 players in the portal. Well, you know what?
There's not 2,000 scholarship football players in the portal. Nope.
And there will be some that might be able to find be a walk-on at a Power 5 program. Maybe it's where their parents went to school. Maybe they're just a local legend that wanted to stay close to home and wanted to walk on in the program. But you know what? For their final 2 years of eligibility, maybe they want to go down to a different level and get a scholarship. This will help some of those and alleviate pressure that way.
Yeah,
certainly alleviate pressure with guys just not being able to find a home because some of these schools just don't have spots. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing throughout the summer. Even though there's kind of a waiver process kind of going on, everybody kind of expects that people that are in the portal now, they're going to slowly find homes. And then, are we going to get another wave of this? And related to this conversation too is the further discussions about transfer windows. And I think that's obviously something more on the transformation committee's plate. The football oversight has discussed this topic, quite at length really. And I think that's ultimately going to happen and bring a little bit of semblance of, I guess, order to the sport. But this is kind of the first step is let's just put that 85-man roster limit out there. Let's study the issue and then let's adjust from there.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the walk-on component because I was literally talking to an analyst at the Division II level earlier today that was saying like this is actually a very big deal for us. This was at a guy at a school in Texas where it's like we go in there and we look for people that were PWOs, preferred walk-ons at some of these bigger Texas institutions, get 2 or 3 years of higher level training and food and coaching, and then when they realize they're never going to play, come down to Angelo State or Midwestern and be part of our program and come back closer to home. And that's part of their roster management. Everybody, everyone's going to end up somewhere. There may not be enough spots in the Sun Belt, and that just means that's a benefit for the Southland. And if there's not enough spots in the Southland, somebody from the Lone Star is going to get somebody. And then somebody from there is maybe going to decide football's not it for them anymore, right? Or maybe they go down NAIA or something else. There's a spot for everybody. You did hit on, is there a transfer window proposal being discussed now or voted on now? Because this is something that we both get asked all the time.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything formal that is going off memory serving. There's not anything formal going in front of the council this time around. Obviously, they meet again in June as well. So, there's time, I guess, for additional committee meetings and to send it out there. But the actual transfer portals and when those windows will be have been a significant part of the conversation as well. So, I think there's been talk about whether it will be certainly right after the end of your season, whether it's right after the bowl game, really kind of at least providing, an allowance for the fact that, yes, people are going to transfer. That's totally natural. People understand they have this option. I mean, this is something that current students have, right? You can transfer, but you got to hit those deadlines to apply for those other colleges. You got to, kind of go through the entire process. And, this is kind of bringing a little bit of that to the athletic realm. And, I think for the most part, that is something that will end up happening and probably later this summer, if nothing else. It's possible that the way the committee, the D1 Council has changed things. It has been an evolution, right? They had certain things where they could put it on the docket and vote on it the next month, and then that kind of went away, and they're like, Now we had to kind of send proposals away, and we were going to table a lot of things. So like the D1 Council thing, that is a constantly shifting landscape, but they are going to vote on the 25-man and changes for sure. And then I think there's still some added discussion because it's not just college football that is dealing with transfer windows. It's everything, men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball, like everybody understands this whole portal crunch, is affecting the NCAA at large. And I think they're waiting for some additional data too. But the NCAA research folks are certainly, bringing a lot of information for the leaders that are actually, talking and discussing these proposals to consider as well.
You had recently tweeted something else, speaking of the Transformation Committee, that I had meant to ask you about and hadn't gotten a chance to. If I'm paraphrasing your remarks earlier, but I think you were talking about some consternation from athletic leaders about what's happening with Division I reclassification, because it doesn't seem, and this is what I've heard, that the Transformation Committee is unlikely to come out with like really firm updated guidelines by like August, and yet there's still a deadline to file paperwork now. What are you hearing on that front, and what that's looking like for the handful of institutions in the process of that transfer, that reclassification, or are considering it right now?
Well, I mean, you would probably know a little bit more in terms of some of the D2 and D3 schools that do want to move up, and in terms of who they are. But there is a deadline, right? Like this is the NCAA, right? This is the red tape bureaucracy kings of college athletics, and there is a deadline on June 1st where you basically have to submit your application, obviously, to join the Division I itself. And for schools that maybe haven't done that, maybe schools that have and are anticipating changes down the road, I think there's some lot of nervousness, some angst about what is the future of Division I. What are those minimums? Do you want to apply now, knowing you can get in Division I, because a lot of those applications are simply rubber stamped? Obviously, we've seen a massive amount of conference realignment, not only at the FBS level, but especially at the FCS level, even the D1 AAA level. I mean, there's still more to come. When you hear rumors from the Big East and the WCC and other leagues out there that are certainly considering new members, I mean, like there's a host of openings out there, right? And so for the school leaders themselves, not only do you have to hit that June 1st deadline to apply to Division I, but let's face it, the Transformation Committee work on what the future of Division I, whether that's another subdivision beyond FBS, FCS. Obviously, the Autonomy 5. There are these various fractions, right? And I don't get the sense that any of this work is going to be done by August, by September. That has been communicated to the D1 board. I think everybody expects this to ultimately end up happening by January 2023, whether it's a final report, whether those changes are actually voted on, then probably at the convention in 2023. So everybody's like, what am I reclassifying into? Or conversely, am I going to, miss out on the boat? And so a lot of decisions that need to be made, and like, these are real applications. You got to
Yeah.
have plans. You got to, pony up money and application fees. Like it's not just a simple process saying, raising your hand and saying, hey, I want to be a D1 member. There's an actual process. And so getting that done when you don't really know what some of the future is like, especially for these small schools that are moving up that are going to be impacted by some of these potential changes, it has definitely led to some angst and at least some wanting some guidance in terms of what is ultimately going to happen and what the timeline is.
The only guidance I think formally that a lot of these institutions have gotten was a memo, I want to say a couple of months ago, that said, hey, just so you know, if we raise the bar in 8 months, you are not grandfathered in. Like that you need to be aware for those potential things. And this was something I heard a lot like last fall with many Division II institutions that were contemplating this, thinking like, we got to make this move now because we don't know what the future is going to be. And for FCS to FBS, now it's a little bit less clear. But you're right. The one thing that like I have heard is that a formal moratorium either this summer or in the next couple of months is less likely, especially because there are so many conferences that, quite frankly, need Division II teams to achieve some semblance of stability. So that becomes less politically popular to have that. But all that's an issue. And you're right, to your earlier point, we're not done with realignment. We're not done because you're right about maybe the bigger level. We could see something with the West Coast Conference. We could see something potentially with the Missouri Valley Conference in the next year. They're not done forever for college basketball. The A10 may end up getting a 16th team or losing a team. Like that's not impossible. But in terms of like immediate future, look at the Colonial Athletic, look at the MEAC,
Yep.
which might not exist in a year. We shall see. And look at the WAC. Who I think I've mentioned this on Extra Points, but I'll say it here in case you forgot. Very good chance Incarnate Word decides to stay in the Southland. That's something where we should receive some sort of clarity in the near future. If I was a betting man at this point, I think it's like 60-40. They don't end up actually joining the WAC. And that's probably an Extra Points newsletter here for another time. There's one other big change that is being contemplated more at the conference level that will change the way that football operates here. But before we dig into that here real quick, I did want to very quickly shout out our dear friends at Home Field Apparel, our sponsors, our biggest patrons, and of course the providers of fine, comfortable, officially licensed collegiate apparel for the shirt region, which we call torsos, right? And also the pants region. T-shirts, crew necks, tank tops, joggers. Home Field makes it all, and they make it with all of the fun weirdo vintage logos. This Saturday is Arkansas, I think right. That's the new episode here in Big News Saturday. There's a couple other big Power 5 institutions that are going to be coming in the weeks in the near future. They've refreshed a couple of other places. I'm probably going to get several stuff from Big News season, and not just maybe the big school that you're thinking of here. Very excited about it. Our Arkansas friends are very excited about it. Our mid-major friends are very excited about it. You should be very excited about it because look, the weather's warming up, man. This is like the first time I've worn a collared shirt all day in a while. I'm mostly just in t-shirts. It's going to be in the 80s in Chicago for probably the next 3 months. So that's, outside of going to like NACDA, I'm basically always going to be in a Home Field shirt. You probably are too. So now's the time to go grab some of that Home Field stuff.
Yeah, I got my Butler shirt going on here. Like the thing is that I am so excited about the newest season, not just Arkansas. Like you mentioned some of the schools, we've been purview to some of them as well, and the designs are fantastic. And I think if you've not bought some Home Field before, like just peruse the catalog. There's something for everybody. There's a t-shirt for your grandpa. There is a t-shirt for your cousin. Like yeah. you can go hog wild, especially this week, but in general as well.
Yeah, my father-in-law went to UCLA. I bought him and my mother-in-law UCLA shirts. Won myself some brownie points. Stolen a lot of valor from other schools. You should do the same. And when you do, Use promo code Extra Points to save 15% off at checkout. That saves you money. That tells Home Field that it is worth their money and time to continue to sponsor us, which we need in order to actually make this project going. So everybody wins, especially us. Although you also win because you get the T-shirt, which is a great product. And of course, if you are looking to get your stuff on Home Field or your ad on this podcast, which reaches thousands of college sports fans, thought leaders, administrators, media members, everybody else, that is shoot me an email at matt@extrapointsmb.com. Brian, the other thing I want to talk to you about, this ends up being a little bit shorter than some of our other episodes, is some other proposals being considered at the conference level, which are near and dear to my heart, because this is what my corner of sports nerd internet has been shouting from the heavens for years. It is what the subreddit people have been shouting for years, the SB Nation crew, RIP, and that is getting rid of divisions. Down with divisions, long live pods. And this is something that could become a potential reality, right?
Yeah, I mean, not just pods, but really big changes to how you determine a conference champion. And look, this is a proposal that originated out of the Pac-12, so I think you can kind of understand the direction that they're going to go down the road. Now, you mentioned pods, and I know that's going to be a big discussion point, but basically what the council is going to do is kind of allow the conferences to determine how they want to crown their own champion with conference championship games. There had been a requirement in there if you basically are at 12 or more, you had to have divisions and divisional play to set up your champion. Look, this is something that the Big 12 is obviously going to have to battle as they kind of expand and contract for these next couple of cycles of schedules and how they are going to figure out some of these divisional play. I think obviously the SEC and ACC discussions are pretty advanced. I know of one league already out there that has their proposal ready to go. They're really just waiting for the kind of rubber stamp from the committee on Wednesday, and then they will have their vote among ADs and presidents and whatnot to change their model. So this is going to affect a lot of conferences. Pretty much everyone is going to look at how we can best not only crown a champion, but put our conference in better position to get to the college football playoff. Especially now that it's not expanding. Teams like in the Pac-12 in particular. This is going to be a big thing for them to match up 1 and 2, really kind of avoid some of the pitfalls of divisional play to where you could have a 7-8 win team, pull an upset in a championship game, and then really torpedo your bid and torpedo tens of millions of dollars as well. So it's going to be a big change. I'm sure some fans out there might have just figured out who's in the ACC Atlantic and who's in the ACC. Or which teams are formerly legends and which team are formerly.
I gotta double check where Wake Forest is every time they come up. I'm sorry,
I just figured out which ones were probably last year. I think I had consulted the standing sheet enough to where I was like, I can do it by memory now. But the American is obviously in a unique position. They have an odd number of teams, so it's like they have to kind of change scheduling components. Obviously, the Big 12 they play the round robin right now, so it's not really going to affect them, but they're really way behind this proposal because they know what it means for the future and some of the changes that they're going to have in terms of conference membership. So the more interesting thing is not that council is going to vote on this proposal and it's going to go in effect as soon as this year. I think everybody's looking at changes for 2023. I mean, this is
it's too late to make a change for next year. The schedule, the cards have already been printed, man. They're already going to be hanging up in every bar and office across the country.
I mean, we're already getting TV announcements. So that ship has sailed. I mean, this is a freaking sport that schedules, 15 years out in advance. So, I think it is important to kind of keep that in the back of your mind. But come 2023, there's going to be some big changes, and it's going to, there's going to be a lot of debate right now. I mean, I already know, as a matter of fact, that the debate coming out of Destin when the SEC has their meetings, it's going to be a little heated, I think, in some of those rooms among the ADs, among some of the presidents about who is your permanent rival, and fans are certainly going to be able to chime in and that's going to be a talking point, I'm sure, over the next couple of weeks. And, it's like, if you get stuck and you're in the SEC and you want your pod and you want a bit of an easier crossover, I'm sure teams are just going to be fighting over having to play Vanderbilt for the next couple of years, sorry, Clark Lee and everybody there at Vandy, but there are going to be teams that are like, I don't want to play. I don't want to have to play Florida and LSU and Auburn or something like that as my 3 permanent opponents when they get Vanderbilt. Teams are going to be fighting over some of the lesser known SEC programs, but and trying to avoid others like Alabama. But the bottom line is the schedule in it just sucks. Like teams are just not being able to visit places, in your own conference. Like, I mean, the SEC and the ACC in particular, I mean, like you're going like 6 or 7 years without visiting some places. I don't even think Georgia has visited A&M, yet. And they joined the league, it's 7, 8 years ago.
It's about an 8-year cycle, I think, the way that it's set up right now. It is, in terms of trying to deliver the best possible product to fans. And I think the best possible product to the athletes by saying you get to actually visit everywhere. Current system's pretty indefensible, and it becomes more indefensible the bigger your conference actually gets. What you're just talking about in terms of trying to make the conference championship game an event that people would actually care about more, I don't think you can do it with divisions, particularly because most divisions are set up geographically, and talent tends to be geographically concentrated. The biggest example is the Big Ten. And during the regular season, Big Ten West teams beat Big Ten East teams all the time. But guess where the good football players are? They're not in Big Ten West states. So it's basically a division of teams that can recruit at championship level and teams that are Iowa. And Iowa will win lots of football games and they'll go to the Citrus Bowl, but there's a reason the Big Ten East team wins every single time in the championship game. And it will probably continue that way for a long period of time. The divisions in the Pac-12, I would not consider to be especially balanced. It's been kind of a weird time for the LA and the Arizona schools for the past couple of years, but I think there's more upside for most of the Southern programs than there are for maybe the Stanford Cals and Wazoos here of the world in terms of where the good football players are and where the money actually is. So let's not do it this way. And the SEC, the SEC and the ACC are the best possible examples. The fun thing for everyone to fight about, I guess, is just like, okay, what games do we absolutely have to play every single year? And that's a tough thought experiment because there's only one team that I think meaningfully considers like Vanderbilt to be a rival, and that's true for the kind of the dregs of most places. Right? Who has a deep, passionate connection to Oregon State outside of Oregon?
Well, I mean, look at the ACC.
You got to pick somebody. Yeah,
Louisville. Like, there are some old Big East rivalries with like the Syracuses and Boston Colleges of the world. But like, who's a natural rival in the ACC for Louisville that kind of Clemson and Florida State have? They've had that kind of budding rivalry. Yes, they're kind of at the top of things. Obviously, you have FSU and Miami, and you have some natural rivals built in that. But like, how you're going to plug some of those holes in terms of who that third game is on a regular basis is definitely going to be. Not only has been an interesting conversation at a lot of these spring meetings, but it's going to kind of follow this decision as conferences kind of really have the mat well rolled out for them to make these changes. And I think it's also going to be really job changing. I mean, if you're Maryland, if you're Indiana, like your job could get a lot better. Just in terms of how your perception
so much better for Maryland, right? Or the ceiling for that Maryland job in this current structure is, if you hit everything perfectly, you finish third in the Big Ten. And quite frankly, like as somebody who's still emotionally invested in Ohio State, like I don't want to see them play Maryland every single year. The Ohio State is going to play Rutgers every single year. You could do that for a decade. Rutgers will not win once. It is just now barely starting to become a little bit competitive. I want to say the median score in that series has been like Ohio State 49, Rutgers like 9. Right? We don't need this every year. We need more Rutgers, Purdue, for the sake of both of those programs, right? And or I guess Rutgers, Nebraska, if we want to talk about where
it helps at the top of the end too. I mean, look at Penn State or your Michigan State, and you obviously have Ohio State, really running that league. But like, you lose one of those games, and especially because of the head-to-head and how valuable that is in a division like the East. I mean, now you at least still have a shot, right? It's all about keeping teams alive. For these
selling hope. Yep.
And then you add in playoff expansion, like you add that carrot out there. It's not just, you're still alive for the conference title. Now you're still alive for a, maybe even hosting a playoff bid or something like that. So like there's a lot that, this fixes. And I think more than anything, it's really good for the TV partners. Let's face it. Like they
finally
another Maryland Rutgers, thing on their schedule every single year. Like now they can at least sell some of these big time games and make sure that they are bigger deals because you're going to get more variety. You're going to have A&M play Georgia a little bit more often. You're going to have Florida, making that trip down to Auburn, which they have not played all that often. And that's a natural rivalry given the distance between those schools. Like, there's just a lot lot of things that I think is a big win for everybody. And frankly, I'm kind of surprised it took this long. You would have thought after especially the first couple rounds of college football playoff talk and expansion and everything that went on there, you think that, hey, maybe we should change things up. And I'm a bit surprised it has even taken this long until we get to this vote on Wednesday for this to even happen. But it definitely is.
I think it's because, especially in the SEC, it becomes such a political decision. And you really do have to be a high level diplomat to get this to work, right? Because if you tell somebody that, okay, 2 of your 3 protected games you're going to have every year are Alabama and Georgia, that has very significant financial repercussions. Even if that changes the rest of your schedule, maybe some years that's advantageous, sometimes it isn't. Inertia is a powerful force. I look forward to it. I don't think anybody should have divisions. Maybe not every single league tears this down at the same time, but like, I don't think there's a way you can draw up a Big 12 division geographically or culturally where it makes any sense. So let's not even bother trying. It doesn't really make sense in the ACC. Maybe we have to manufacture a rivalry or two, but we've done that in other leagues before. We had to do that for South Carolina when they came into the SEC and nobody died. So I'm going to, in the show notes on Extra Points, I'm going to include kind of the SB Nation Magnus Opus from my colleague Jason Kirk, but I worked on this when we were writing it. It obviously doesn't include Texas and Oklahoma in this world because they weren't part of the SEC when we all still had jobs, staff jobs together. But it did include our proposal for the protected rivalries for every team. It may not be the most competitively fair, but I think it would provide the best product for everyone. And I don't think that many fan bases would be upset. Like, as an Ohio State guy, I would rather have Michigan and Penn State be protected games, even though that inarguably means Ohio State will have the hardest schedule all the time. Sure, Ohio State. Our country needs Ohio State, Penn State every year. Like we should not risk that falling off of the schedule. If that means we get a little bit less Ohio State Rutgers, that is a sacrifice Matt Brown, am personally prepared to make. We'll see how everybody else feels about it.
Well, I mean, just the balance, it brings. Even look at the Sun Belt these last couple of years, right? They were so imbalanced in terms of that East Division where you had the Appalachian states, you have the Louisiana, and then you would look across the island, it provided opportunities for some schools to get wins, but really kind of put a damper on certain programs where your Georgia States and Georgia Southerns at times, they were almost limited, with an artificial ceiling, given that there were other double digit wins, teams. Like, look at the Mountain West, another great example. Like, they had 3 10 wins teams, and 2 of them were basically out of the running by mid-November in terms of getting to that division title game. That's not good for anybody. It's not good for interest in the sport. It's not good for selling your conference about how, hey, look at all these good teams that are still in the running. And that matters. It matters when you're on game day and you can talk about more than a couple handful of title races. I think that is an important thing to keep in mind. You got to understand there are other secondary effects from this in terms of bowl partners. That they're going to probably get better matchups. When you're saying, yeah, we got stuck with the 4th team in the Big Ten, Big Ten East, like you're not thrilled about that. But when those divisions are eliminated and you have a team that can say, hey, yeah, we got a 7 or 8 win, team that is going for the bowl, for the first time in a while, you kind of get behind that versus kind of looking at where they finished in the standing. So more than anything, I think this is going to be a big change for everybody to just kind of get used to. Everybody is so resistant to change in college football, but at the end of the day, it's going to help coaches. It's going to be a better experience for players in terms of where they're traveling to and where they're getting to play in some of those environments. And for the TV partners and conferences themselves, they'll be able to sell a better product. And so it's going to be fun to see.
Yeah, let's take the easy wins where we can get them, everybody, because there's going to be a bunch of big old drag it out fights where Brian and I don't have good answers, and neither does anybody else. And there's going to be lots of wailing and gnashing of teeth and renting of clothing. This is easy. Let's go do the easy things right now. Bask in the adulation from your television partners and your fans and your ability to sell season tickets, and we'll deal with the other stuff here later. We'll get you out of here a little bit earlier today because we got a bunch of other stuff that we got to talk about here later this week and also here on Extra Points. But just because we are not going a full 60 minutes doesn't mean there's not a bunch of other content for you, particularly on Collegiate Sports Connect. I recorded I think a couple of interesting interviews. I'll share a couple of these in the show notes. We talked to the president of West Texas A&M at the Division II level about his goals and proposals for a Texas-centric league and what the future of college sports and Texas looks like at that lower level. I talked today to the executive producer of some of the content you're seeing on things like Hogs Plus, these subscription services, now supporting a couple of different SEC schools. And spoiler alert, a couple more that I'm going to tell you about in a few days that are going to be getting this service here too. Brian's had a couple of big conversations as well. What else should we should direct our audience to so they don't miss everything?
Well, if they're not already an Extra Point subscriber, extrapointsnb.com is always a great way to get in on your writing. And obviously you'll have the show and various other connects that you also pass along there. But the D1 Ticker is the place for all of that. Not only our connects, but if you're interested in the industry, Collegiate Sports Connect as well. A great place for all of these videos. And if you're kind of in the market, it's kind of that time of the year where people maybe look around and see what's out there. If there's a job change in your future, or you want to get into college athletics, that's a great entry way to get into the industry. And there's a lot of ADs that are on there searching for creative types. They're searching for assistant ADs. If you're out there, marketing folks, you run the gamut in the athletic department. They are searching for it on Collegiate Sports Connect. So fun times ahead. But the bottom line is make sure you're signed up for Extra Points. Make sure you're giving us 5 stars here and going for 2, and signed up for D1 Ticker.
That'll do it for today. We'll be back in touch with you here in a couple of days. I'm Matt. That's Brian. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you on the internet.